Hi, this is Eddie Visa. You're listening to Breaking the Fourth Wall. I was Mandark in Dexter's Laboratory. Ha 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 ha.
You are listening to Breaking the Fourth Wall on Realm of the Mist Entertainment.
Probably the easiest way to screw the relationship up. Guys, welcome. I'm gonna butcher your name. I gotta.
How do you butcher Andy? It's 4 letters.
Well, no, Andy's fine.
I'll just stick to Andy then.
Okay, we'll stick to Andy. I'm here talking to Andy. From Try Not to Laugh podcast, TNTL, Mr. Andy Flegel.
It's Flegel. Flegel if you want to get fancy with it.
Flegel. Yeah, we're French today. Flegel. And you are obviously one of the hosts, because there are two people, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. Brandon is the other host.
Okay. Which one's the funny one?
That would be me.
Okay, good. I got the right one then. We'll never do Brandon. I'm kidding. You're welcome.
Nobody does Brandon.
Nobody does Brandon. Well, first and foremost, tell me about your podcast. What is Try Not to Laugh?
Try Not to Laugh. First off with the name, we try to separate ourselves from all the shitty cat videos on YouTube by calling it TNTL podcast. But basically, it's a conversational comedy podcast. It's two old friends, just BSing about whatever's on their mind. The show is, it's really just whatever's going on in the world at that time. Obviously, with all the nonsense that's going on right now, the virus is a big thing, and we talk a lot about it. But prior to all that, it's pretty much just day-to-day stuff. We are two married men, not to one another, but to women. And we talk about, being married and being dads. We talk about our jobs. We talk about, hiding in the bathroom and from your family and masturbating and, overeating and, stuff like that. So music, we were of a 90s generation. So we talk a lot about 90s music. So really just our demographic is basically any male who's between the ages of 35 and 44, and you're looking for a fun escape, for a couple hours a week. We're your guys.
Okay, and thank you for the interview. That's pretty much no.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, but it's funny you mentioned that in 90s music, because that's the last time music was music. I'm sorry, that modern shit. Taylor Swift can suck a dick. Unless she wants to come on the show, in which case, if she wants to suck a dick, I mean, I might lose sponsorships over it, but I'm pretty sure I'll get views. So what made you and your friend decide to even want to go this route? I mean, what influenced you to even want to become a podcaster?
We, we spend a lot of time on the phone, and I think like most fairly new podcasters, we kind of came to that realization. We were just like, I've always been into podcasting in terms of, being a listener and being a fan of comedy. And, with the amount of time that we spent on the phone joking around and, just making shitty jokes, we kind of came to this realization that, not only would we like to hear our own voices, but some people might actually get some enjoyment out of this. So correct. I think like many other people, we bought some cheap equipment and we started recording stuff and practicing and trying to figure out a structure. And, we just kind of, just ran with it from there. And, in doing so, Brandon, it's funny enough, Brandon doesn't listen to podcasts at all. And I don't think he really minds me saying that. He's literally never listened to a podcast. He has no idea who anybody is. You could talk to him about some of the biggest podcasters and like anyone besides like, Joe Rogan or Adam Carolla, he'll have no fucking clue who they are. But I love podcasting. I think it's, it's just the coolest thing in the world. I love the fact that it's this new, it's just this new way of communicating your thoughts, and not only monetizing something that you love, but just being able to do something where you can express yourself, and whether it's, something comedic or whether it's something, really thought-provoking or emotional. It's just this really interesting art form, and it's so new that it's almost like this Wild West scenario where people can literally do what they want with such a minimal investment, other than your time, really. If you've got the time, I think that's the biggest misconception with podcasting. Then, and like I said, we kind of started off, I think, like many other people. We were just on the phone with each other for extended periods of time. And we said, well, screw, why don't we just record this? And, and that's why I think most podcasters don't make it past, episode 6 or 7, because they realize it's a lot more work than just doing that. But if you, if you're okay with that, if you're okay with the amount of work that it takes, whether it's, it's sourcing guests or marketing or, finding music or editing, whatever it is, it's, I find that kind of work is, it allows you to express yourself in so many different ways. So I find a lot of enjoyment in those things. Some people find it very tedious. Some people don't have the time for it. And I understand that too. But I guess to answer your question, we've always loved comedy, and that's why we started a comedy podcast. I've never been really into acting. I've never been into stand-up. I appreciate both art forms, and I wish I could do either one, but I don't feel like I would really be that good at it. But I've also loved comedy forever. And right. I feel like podcasting kind of gives me an outlet. It allows me to do comedy in some capacity where I could still get my voice out there, get my thoughts out there, and it gives me some sort of stage or platform where I can express my thoughts and, and actually have people, come back to me or send me an email or post a comment and be like, oh shit, episode 30 something was really funny. I really enjoyed when you guys talked about, you were going to create your own dictatorship and, you were going to name your country this, that was great. Like, to me, like there's no greater reward.
Well, obviously something you said earlier when you were talking about that you and Brandon, kind of plan out your episodes. Does that mean you script? It's not ad-libbed. You know your sections, you know your points, you know what subject topic of conversation you're going to have going in, or are you more ad-lib and I don't want to say situational. What's the term? Free form comedy.
Yeah, well, there's no point of the show that's ever scripted. We've made it a point to never go that route. And I think it would take away from the humor. I think it would take away from the kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of disingenuous, at least from a comedy perspective. I think right. certain types of shows you have to script, but I think for what we're doing, it just wouldn't work. But we do structure the show, and we're very careful about that. I feel like to just kind of jump in feet first without any structure would be very difficult, at least for us. I mean, there's conversational shows where you can literally just hit record and go, and it could be the freaking greatest, funniest, smartest show in the world. But for us, I think and I don't know that we've necessarily figured it all out either. I mean, I don't know if we ever will. But ultimately, for us, at the point that we're at, the formula that seems to be working is having some basic structure, and that is saying, okay, we'll have a meeting once a week, and that's sitting down for an hour and saying, okay, here's the topic, and then we're going to have X amount of subtopics, because a show without any sort of subtopics or like meat to the show. Mm-hmm. Really, there is no show. Like, if there's no takeaway for an audience, like if somebody's listening and you're just kind of skimming certain topics, but you're never really delving into anything, then you're not giving them any sort of takeaway. I think that's really important for a listener, that, yeah, like they're being entertained, but if there's no actual takeaway from the show, then that's whether it's subconscious or not, I think that's kind of what ends up losing an audience. So if somebody could take away, whether it's a little tiny, speck of information, or, whatever the show is about, so if we're talking about, let's say, one of my favorite episodes that we did was episode 37. I think I referenced it before. So like we were joking around about leaving the country. Like if the corona thing got worse and worse, are there any other countries that we would leave to, like we would actually move to, that have better numbers or that are less affected than ours? And, that was kind of like just the general joke of it. But then when you actually get into why would we leave these countries and what are these countries about? Do you need a visa to get into these countries? And then when you do a little bit of homework, you don't have to do a ton of work. I'm not saying like, make it a part-time job or a full-time job. Fucking Google it. It's 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Spend 10 minutes researching it and you've got yourself a quality show. But don't do any homework and you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So like you can, that allows us to make it that much funnier. Now I actually know what I'm saying. I could tell you, whether or not it's like it's a democratic state or, whatever it is. I could tell you what language they speak there. I could tell you what the foods are, or, we even went as far as to like teach each other the languages, and like it makes for a funnier joke. So, and that's what works for us. I'm not telling anyone else how to do their show because, again, I mean, everybody has a formula for their own show and everybody may be more successful than the last guy. I'm sure there's thousands of other shows with way better numbers than ours. So we haven't figured it all out. But as of right now, I mean, I guess to answer your question, none of the shows scripted, but there's definitely a very mindful structure to it.
Well, I'm gonna preface this this next question with a little story of breaking the fourth wall, which is the birth of Realm of the Mist Entertainment, the network that exists. When Breaking the Fourth Wall first came out, it was me and a couple friends, and we would bitch about movies over the phone while I held a digital recorder to receiver. That's how we started. And at one point, we wound up on an internet radio show, radio program called RadioCastFM.com. And RadioCast, although it was an internet radio station, wanted to try to remain general audience. So the profanity and everything else that was general nature for us had to be censored. So, I would do hours upon hours upon hours. Like you were saying, this is the easy part. Sitting down and actually doing the show is the easy part. Prepping and editing afterwards is what you have to spend the time on.
Right.
But I would sit down and I would bleep out or cut out all the curse words. Well, we had one particular show that went completely off the rails, and I swear half the show was beeps. But apparently I missed a word, and wouldn't you know it, one Karen caught it and wrote into the station and bitched about it. And the word, I'll tell you right now, the word was twat. And I had to give a public apology for the word twat. And so the reason that story is because of the fact that we had a meeting, me and the panelists of Breaking the Fourth Wall at the time, and we decided to record this meeting for whatever reason. And what it was about the apology that I had to give, and the word that got out of control and that we got to censor ourselves more, which really we were thinking about leaving RadioCast because of it. And it turned into us reading the 63 last known words you cannot say according to the FCC. And then another hour of us coming up with a whole bunch of phrases and words that you can say that were not on that list. And one of the members dared me to release it. You don't have the balls to release this as an episode. I said, all right. I released it as Breaking the Fourth Wall presents After Hours, because it wasn't a show, it was After Hours. And the subtitle was Fuck the FCC. Wouldn't you know that not only launched After Hours as a podcast for Realm of the Mist Entertainment, it was one of our biggest shows we ever did, simply because, like you said, we were on a subject of I got to apologize for a dirty word. Well, what's the word you can't say? You can't say this. You can't say. Well, what about this? Can I say this? And 2 hours of that. The reason I bring this up, here's the smooth segue. The reason I bring this up is obviously with a podcast, with a comedy podcast, comedy is a very fickle mistress. Art in any form is subjective, but comedy is especially subjective. What I find funny, somebody else finds offensive. How often do you find yourself fielding negativities because somebody just didn't get the joke, or maybe took too much to heart, whatever topic you were covering?
That actually doesn't happen to us too often. The interesting thing is a lot of and I don't know if it's just because of the audience that we've targeted, and just I guess the people that have come to expect our sense of humor at this point. But I've only really had maybe one or two instances where people have commented something and maybe said something to the effect of like, "Oh, not cool," or "fuck off," But I've really never experienced any like Karen-like situations, I feel like, I don't know, like I almost wish I would, like I'm looking forward to that moment. It's one of those things where like, like I want to get to the point where like so many thousands of people are discovering it that, that I guess the consequence is that, all the Karens are finding you now, and they're just like, "Oh shit, I found this on my son's iPhone. He's listening to your bullshit show, and I don't worry about it. I erased it, but I just want to let you know that him and all his friends are listening to your nonsense." And okay, that's fine. I'll make sure they, by next week they're all wearing my hoodies too. But
the T-shirt,
right? And I'll send you a Pandora bracelet. But I think, but no, I really, honestly, I've never had maybe like one or two comments. That's all it was, and I think, but I welcome it. I really do. I could care less. Most of the stuff that we talk about, it's not very. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do say, it's not politically correct. I mean, we don't go too far off the rails. Brandon's typically somewhat careful about the stuff he says because. His life outside the podcast. I mean, he is a small business owner, so he tries to be mindful of, not being entirely himself. So that being said, I'm sure there's things that he wishes he could say, but he holds back. Mm-hmm. But, so maybe he kind of leaves that ball in my court a lot of the times. But yeah, I mean, there was times where, he'll even surprise me, like we just put one out this morning where I was listening back to it and I lost it on my way to work, because I'll always listen back. Like the morning we release a new episode, like I'll listen to it on the way to work, and like I almost had to pull over because I couldn't even fucking contain myself. We were reviewing companies. So just real quick, so the episode was basically, we were talking about all these people who were out of work. And so I guess, so all these people are out of work, and we're talking about this handful of companies, really, really big conglomerates that are hiring right now. And why doesn't everybody go and work for them? So the Amazons, the Instacarts, all those guys. Mm-hmm. And one of them was Kroger, the supermarkets. And he's saying, you can go and be one of those guys who just like, bags groceries at the end of the conveyor. And I'm like, I was like, yeah, Brian, aren't those jobs, they're typically just reserved for like the mentally challenged? And he's like, yeah, but I need a job. He's like, move over. And I was like, come on, dude, that's not right. And he's like, they won't know the difference. And I just fucking lost it. And like, sometimes things like that, like he'll just shine through. And, but that's kind of when I expect the emails to come through. It'll be stuff like that. You know what I mean? So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. And still nothing comes through. And, and yet it's, and the episodes are still doing all right. So I know it's not like nobody's listening. I'm like, all right, well, I guess nobody heard it. So if the numbers are there and people aren't saying anything, I'm assuming everyone's just along for the ride. Like everyone's cool with it.
Well,
So
I think right now might be the best time. I've had this conversation with other podcasters before, but this is like a perfect time for podcasters. The silver lining in the bad situation is the fact that, one, everybody is looking for an escape of the same four walls, except for the first responders and grocery store clerks that unfortunately are still working, while the rest of us are twiddling our thumbs waiting for the day we can go back to work. We're looking for escape. So comedy is definitely an escape. And most of them are probably agreeing with Brandon. Like, yeah, move your ass over, man.
yeah, no, seriously, man. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those jobs, like the jobs that, typically you would see like teenagers doing or even like illegals doing, a lot of the landscaping jobs and such, like people are just going to start taking them back, because people need to fucking go back to work right now. So it's...
I hate playing the speculation part, but you did mention that your co-host is a small business owner.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take this in a serious direction just for a minute, just because it gets a chance to actually discuss this. With the coronavirus, is he shut down or is he marked essential?
He's still marked essential.
Okay, so he's still active.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good news. That changes the question then, because the question was going to be, how is he surviving? Because one of the biggest concerns with this going on, the longer it goes, a lot of small businesses are going to wind up going under because of the fact that they can't cover their bills. They're not producing. They're not performing into any type of income. So I was concerned about that. I'm glad to hear that he's essential though, so he's still working. Good, and then we can go back to the comedy. How long have you guys been around? Like, how long has the podcast been running?
So we started about I want to say last October. Well, that's when we released it. So we've been doing this for well over a year now, but we waited a few months. We waited probably well over 5 or 6 months until we even released our first episode. We did not want anyone hearing what we were putting out at first. We were not comfortable with what we were doing. We knew that we were not good enough to even put the stuff out there. Even once we put out the first 3 episodes, we knew that we weren't all the way there yet. But I mean, at some point you gotta, shit or get off the pot. So we put together our 3 best ones, and those were our first 3 that we initially released. But we've been doing it for over a year now. So we're finally comfortable enough where, at least we can send it to people we know and not be like totally cringing when we send that link, like now I'm fine with it. Now, I mean, I'll send it to whoever. I don't really care. I get emails and texts from, people I haven't talked to in years, and they're just like, dude, I was laying in bed with my wife listening to your podcast. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I haven't talked to you since 11th grade. Like, all right, thanks.
Your wife and my podcast? That's kind of cool.
But, yeah, I mean, it's, not too long, honestly. I mean, for me at least, I won't speak for Brandon. For me, it feels like it's been a lot longer than it is, just because it's something that I do every single day. Right. And, I'm thinking about it. I'm working at it. Even if I'm not physically doing it, I'm thinking about, whether I'm going to change the artwork for this, or I'm going to be editing that, or like, cause I do all the music for the show. I do the art for the show. I do edit the show. I try not to go too crazy with the editing. Obviously, I try to keep it as natural as possible. But, I mean, there's always going to be things that you want to kind of eliminate, especially because it's not even so much that, a joke doesn't hit or, we just don't like the way we sound. It's also the fact that we both record in a home studio and we record remotely. I'm in New York and he's in North Carolina. Okay. And I'm in the house with a wife, 3 kids, a dog, and a cat. And he's kind of in the same boat down there. So with all of this craziness going on in the house, you're always hearing stuff going on, and there's always background noise, and it's unavoidable, which is also another reason that we record so early. Like we do the show Saturday mornings at 6 a.m.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and the whole reason is, one, we both kind of wake up early because that's, I mean, 6 a.m. in dad time is like 11 a.m.
Right.
And but also, I mean, we try to get up before everyone else just so we get a little bit of quiet time. You know, we can get started and, you know, not be bothered. But halfway through, you know, the first episode, as we're recording it, all of a sudden you're hearing footsteps and dogs barking and stuff like that. So a lot of times I end up having to edit stuff like that out. So you're constantly like, the wheels are always just turning. You're like, all right, I got to go back to this thing. I got to take that out and whatever. So it never ends. I feel like I've been doing this for years, even though it's only been one.
I get that. Again, with running what originally was supposed to be one single podcast bitching about movies, has turned into this conglomerate of a network where we have something like 14, 15 different podcasts that run. We've launched a gaming channel now, Sounds Dicey Gaming. So we have about 3 tabletop role play sessions that go on, plus video game Let's Plays. And of course, you know, and I'm in the middle of all of it because it's my company. So I understand where you're coming from. The moment I go to sleep to the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, I'm damn near almost all the time in front of this computer.
A very restful 20 minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah, whether it's working on my own stuff or setting things up for everybody, cutting out their graphics, putting together their intros, uploading their episodes, and making short releases, and promotion. I think the biggest thing that eats the most of my time is running around trying to make sure that people know that this stuff has been released. Which kind of leads me to my next question for you is, how do you find your promotional ends? Like, have you found a good niche for what you do? What are some of the tricks or techniques that you do?
As far as a promotional niche, no, definitely not. I think that's something I'm forever seeking. As of right now, you know, I'm always testing out different ways of doing it. You know, I think some of the most successful ways of doing it as of yet has been really just doing exchanging guest spots. You know, finding like-minded podcasters to work with, you know. Other than that, just joining podcasting groups, you know, trying to network with people, you know, exchanging, you know, kind of like, not necessarily like review exchanges, because I'm not really big on that, but like, you know, just kind of getting involved with other podcasts, you know, like getting other people to listen to it so that you can get feedback from them and see if they can, you know, kind of help get your name out there and you do the same for them. So, right. You know, rather than just like a cheap exchange where it's just like, hey, you know, you give me 5 stars, I'll give you 5 stars, and then nobody's listening to each other's stuff. You know, because when we first got into it, I kind of like saw what was happening with a lot of that stuff. Like, you know, when I first joined a lot of those podcasting Facebook groups and all that, the Reddit groups, I noticed a lot of people were doing all that shady business. And then I kind of, you know, separated myself from a lot of them and realized who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
Right.
And, you know, and the better ones are the ones that are more interested in, you know, better quality shows and, you know, really how to propel themselves and separate themselves from those other guys. You know, like, yeah, I will include you in my network, or I will work with you, but it's only so that you make me better and then I'll make you better in return. So, you know, I've tried to attach myself to, you know, podcasters like that, you know, like you, for example, you know what I mean? Like we work well together. And, you know, and then we've got, you know, other podcasters who we work well together, work well with together. And, but apart from that, you know, obviously there is some level of fuckery online because you can't completely avoid that. You know what I mean? Like if there's going to be a new episode, there's always going to be some groups that you're going to spam online. And, you know, I feel like you have to, you know, there's no way around that. And I try not to take advantage too much. I always try to make sure that it's relevant, you know, like I'm not going to take, if I do an interview with somebody who is, let's say, a singer in a rock band, I'm not going into like a K-pop fucking room, like chat group, just because their numbers are better and being like, yo, check out this fucking K-pop metal, whatever, you know what I mean? Like you can't. Like I try to be as transparent as I can if I'm already spamming these poor people. So at least make it relevant.
No, it makes sense if you interview I interviewed Sean Kanan, who was Mike Barnes from Karate Kid 3. So go to a Karate Kid fan group. Don't go to Karate Kid 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they'd be like, who the fuck's Mike Barnes?
Right, exactly. And I mean, I see people do it all the time, and I was guilty of it too, in the beginning. Like I didn't know any better, I mean, there were times where I would get us, suspended from Facebook for like 3 or 4 days at a clip, like I would just like new episode, like, oh, episode 4 is out now. And then all of a sudden you start spamming. You're like, oh, comedy page, paste. And then it's like, oh, this one has the word podcasting in it. That must be relevant, and paste. And like next thing you know, like you're locked out. And
how annoying is it? Like I'm assuming you have your own pages and your own groups for Try Not to Laugh.
Yeah. How
annoying is it that you get that block or have to change your password and justify your actions on Facebook, posting even to your own pages and groups?
Yeah.
That's happened to me. That's happened. Like I've had workloads where I've had multiple episodes releasing on the same day. So I post them to all the groups, post them all the pages. Next thing you know, I'm like, yeah, I got to change my password again. It was me.
Yeah, it sucked. It happened to me, actually. It's funny you say that. I interviewed, all right, so there's this comedian, right? Not the biggest comedian in the world, but it's somebody who I really admired. I've been following this guy's career for years. And he was on a radio show that I used to listen to back in like the mid 2000s in New York City. So it's this guy, Chuck Nice. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but like I finally got to interview this guy. And so I make a video with him and everything. And I get a good interview with the guy. And it's like the day I posted it. And I go and I put it up. I didn't even do anything wrong. Like I